You ever notice how nobody's really shocked anymore? That's the thing that keeps bothering me. Something big happens. Another war, another financial scare, another political circus, another once in a lifetime event that somehow happens every 6 months. And nobody gasps. Nobody jumps up and says, wait, what? People just sigh. They scroll, they shake their head and mutter, yeah, sounds about right. 5 years ago, that would have been headlines for a week. Today, people saw it, nodded, and kept scrolling. Yeah, so what? And that reaction right there, that quiet resignation, that's not strength. It's not resilience. It's not wisdom. It's exhaustion. And when an entire civilization starts acting exhausted at the same time, history doesn't ignore that. History leans in. Hi, I'm Tim Suleiman. This is Eagle's View. I don't do hype. I don't do fear porn. I don't scream at you to panic. And I don't lie to you and say everything's fine. What I do here is help people understand what's actually happening under the surface so you can stay calm, grounded, and mentally intact while the world goes through whatever this chapter is. If that sounds useful, please subscribe. Not for hope, for clarity. Now, before someone types in the comments, America is blessed and nothing will ever happen to us because if God is with us, who can be against us? I fully understand that. I've been a missionary for 25 years and I've traveled in many countries in the world. I'm not predicting collapse. I'm describing patterns. Rome thought it was eternal too. Britain thought the sun would never set over it. The Soviets thought they would outlast capitalism. All of them, except for the Soviets, had people saying God is on our side right until the moment they weren't. Faith is beautiful. Denial is not. Let me talk to you like I would talk to my neighbor over the fence. Doesn't it feel like the West, the whole Western world, is just tired? Do you see fatigue? They're not poor, not destroyed, not invaded, just tired. Like a guy who still has a house, still has food on the fridge, still has a paycheck coming in, but wakes up every morning thinking, I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending this makes sense. Everything technically works. Stores are open, gas stations function, planes take off, your phone still loads videos, thank God for that, but something underneath feels thin, brittle, like a structure that looks solid until you lean on it. And here's something most people don't realize until it's too late. Civilizations don't collapse when systems stop working. They collapse when people stop believing those systems are for them. That's when people pull inward. They stop planning 10 years ahead. They stop trusting institutions. They stop believing their kids will live better than they did. That's when anxiety spreads, not panic. That quiet, constant buzz of unease that sits in your chest and never quite leaves. History has seen this before. Let's talk about Rome again. Not the movie version. Rome didn't fall when barbarians stormed the gates. That's a bedtime story we tell ourselves because it's neat and dramatic. Real Rome died slowly. It started dying way before, when politics turned into permanent warfare, when every election felt like the end of the world, when laws were bent depending on who you supported from the Senate, when elites stopped serving the Republic and started serving themselves. Rome still had roads, still had legions, still had gold, but ask a Roman citizen near the end what Rome meant. And you wouldn't get a proud answer. You'd get sarcasm, cynicism, a shrug, breads and circuses. It is what it is. That's the moment that matters. Not when enemies attack, when meaning vaporizes. When people stop asking, what is this system supposed to be? And start asking, what can I get out of this system before it breaks? Once that question becomes normal, the clock is already ticking. Britain learned this lesson too. The British Empire didn't collapse in flames. It woke up one day and realized it couldn't tell the world what to do anymore. The ships were still there, the uniforms were still pressed, the traditions were intact, but the leverage was gone. And that realization is worse than defeat. Defeat lets you blame someone else. Waking up forces you to look in the mirror. Britain adapted, it survived, but it never went back to what it was. Power, once lost, never returns in the same shape. That's not ideology, that's just the laws of gravity. Now let's talk about the Soviet Union because this one gets misunderstood a lot, constantly. The Soviet Union didn't collapse because it couldn't produce food or weapons. It didn't collapse because it was technologically backward or starving. It collapsed because the people running it stopped believing in it. They checked out mentally. They stopped defending funding the project. They stopped governing with conviction and abandoned the ship, condemning the entire population of the country to the long agony of a decaying empire. Tier 1, remember? Once leadership gives up internally on its own values and worldview teaching, everything else follows. The empty shelves came after belief disappeared, not before. You can force people to work, you can force people to comply, but you can't force people to believe. And once belief drains out of leadership class, the entire structure becomes a performance. A very expensive, very fragile performance. Empires don't starve to death, they are abandoned. That's the part most history books are very uncomfortable with. Now let's come back to the United States. No theory, no jargon, just plain language. When people say the US is suffering from ideological exhaustion, here is what that actually means. The people in charge don't believe their own speeches anymore. They repeat words like democracy and freedom the way a cashier repeats, "Have a nice day." It's not fake, it's automatic, robotic, and people can feel this instantly. That's why moral lectures don't land anymore. That's why polished speeches feel hollow. That's why nobody trusts anyone who sounds too rehearsed. Belief turned into branding, into mottos and platitudes. And you can't run a civilization on these. You need an actual living story, a shared purpose, a reason people wake up and think, yeah, I'm part of something worth defending. I'm part of something great. When that vanishes, you get what we have now. People going through the motions while quietly preparing their exit plans. When people talk about narrative collapse, here is what this means in real life. You are told the economy is strong, annual GDP growth is up, but you know your family is one missed paycheck away from bankruptcy, from eviction, from destitution. You are told you are freer than ever, but you see surveillance everywhere. Every move needs permission now. You are told institutions are neutral, but everything feels political. You are told to trust the experts, but the experts keep changing their story all the time. You are told things are getting better, but it doesn't feel better. That gap between what you're told and what you experience is where anxiety lives. Not fear, confusion. When the story doesn't match reality, when it doesn't check out, people stop listening to the story altogether. They abandon the storytellers. And once nobody believes the official narrative, you don't have a country anymore. You have factions, tribes, competing groups fighting for their respective realities. That's not collapse, that's fragmentation, which leads to polarization in the society. And this is much worse because it lasts longer, and it's very, very dangerous. Now, some armchair economist is probably typing, "Let me tell you where you're wrong about the dollar." Go ahead. Explain why allies are hedging. Explain why BRICS keeps expanding. Explain why de-dollarization conversations are happening in capitals that used to be loyal. I'll wait. The dollar is still dominant for now. But dominance isn't like an on-off switch. It's not binary. It exists in layers and degrees, shades and gradients, and it erodes at the edges first. Institutional decay doesn't mean collapse either. It means systems exist but don't solve problems. When rulings don't matter because someone just does it somewhere else. The institution still exists, it just doesn't function. Hospitals exist but feel like machines where treating people takes a backseat to procedures. Universities exist but increasingly feel ideological, where gaining skills seems less important than agendas pushed on campuses. Courts exist, but justice feels secondary as legal decisions are seen through political lenses more and more. Congress exists, but increasingly feels like show business and theater. Regulators exist, but more and more seem to protect corporations rather than consumers. Media exists, but trust has collapsed as mainstream outlets increasingly select a single narrative. Nothing explodes, everything just works. Worse. And because it's slow, people normalize this process. They say, yeah, that's just how things are now. That's how rot survives. It doesn't announce itself, it just becomes normal. And for those saying, stop with the doom porn, you're making people uncomfortable and depressed, listen carefully. I'm not telling you the world is ending. I'm telling you the story you were given no longer explains reality. Doom porn says panic. I'm saying understand. There is a difference. Your anxiety isn't coming from me. It's coming from the gap between what you're told and what you see. I'm just giving that feeling a name. Then there is the part nobody likes talking about. America is still living off its old reputation, its legacy capital. The dollar, the standards, the culture, the brand. A lot of trust was earned decades ago. Today, however, allies hedge, rivals test boundaries, neutral countries play both sides. Nobody's declaring war, but nobody's fully committed either. Prestige fades quietly, not with a bang, with a shrug. Yeah, we work with the Americans, but we also work with China, just in case. That sentence right there, that's what decline looks like in diplomatic language. And finally, productive dominance. America still designs ideas, but more and more others build them. More finance than factories. More speculation with prices, currencies, stocks, options, and futures than engineering and manufacturing. More debt than infrastructure. More lawyers than builders. That doesn't cause collapse overnight. It causes drift. And drift is dangerous because it feels harmless. You're still moving, just not where you think you are going. If you're sitting there thinking, yeah, this is exactly how it feels, subscribe. Not because I have magic answers, because I'm willing to say what most people feel without screaming at you. Here is the dangerous part. The US isn't collapsing. It's in the miscalculation phase. When leaders still think the old rules apply, when rivals probe limits, when internal division turns everything into a zero-sum fight, when every policy becomes a weapon, when compromise looks like betrayal. Say one thing for diplomacy, do another to shape reality. That's not strategy. That's confusion masquerading as policy. That's how any powerful state under pressure makes mistakes. Not because they're weak, because they're confused. A confused empire with nuclear weapons and global reach is more dangerous than a weak one. Weak empires retreat. Confused empires don't. They lash out. I'm not interested in blaming any peoples or cultures. I'm analyzing what powerful states and their governments do when they're under stress. If that analysis makes someone uncomfortable, that's not hatred. That's reality being examined. So let's talk paths forward. Not predictions, just possibilities. Path 1. Overreach. This is a dangerous one. Leadership doubles down, blames enemies, suppresses dissent, ignores reality, starts conflicts to distract its own people from internal collapse. We just need one big win to prove we're still strong, except that win never comes. Or it costs more than it's worth. Trust collapses fast. This is how systems break suddenly instead of slowly. Estimated probability for 2026, 20-25%. This is the loudest path, but not the most likely one. Path 2 is control. This week, the Trump administration announced they're resuming wage garnishments for people in default on students' loans starting in January this month. About 5 million people affected. At a time when families are struggling with stagnant wages and rising costs, the government is seizing paychecks. Chaos scares people, so power centralizes. More rules, more enforcement, more surveillance, less tolerance for dissent, tighter borders, tighter speech, tighter everything. Some people may say, finally someone is doing something. Order returns, but with a price. History shows this always feels good at first, until it doesn't. Because systems built on control don't solve problems. They suppress symptoms, and suppressed symptoms don't disappear. They metastasize. Estimated probability for 2026 is 45-50%, and this, my friends, is the front runner at this time. Path 3, managed decline. The US accepts it can't run the entire world anymore. It focuses inward. It shares power. It stops pretending. Ego takes a hit. Stability improves. This path saves lives, but it requires humility. Empires rarely choose it because managed decline sounds like giving up, and nobody wants to be the leader who presided over giving up. Even if giving up is the smartest move, estimated probability for 2026 is 25-30%. This path is rational, it's humane, it's stabilizing, and that's exactly why it's politically the hardest to undertake. You know how people stay in bad relationships way too long because they're afraid of what's coming after? Nations do the same thing. They cling to systems that stopped working years ago because the alternative feels scarier than the slow decline. So they keep pretending, keep performing, keep hoping something changes. And that, my friends, seems like insanity. Insanity isn't repeating failure. It's knowing it's failing and refusing to stop doing it again and again. Until one day keeping this up in relationships doesn't matter anymore because the other side already decided to move on. If you felt anxious lately, listen carefully. It's not because the world is ending. It's because the story you were given no longer explains reality. Your inner sage, The man of insight inside you knows the map is outdated. That's not panic. That's clarity trying to break through. Understanding that restores calm. You don't survive times like this by doom scrolling. You survive by understanding systems and staying mentally steady while others lose their footing. That's what I help people do. If anxiety about the state of the world is bleeding into your daily decisions, I work one on one as a coach helping people transform from fear to grounded clarity. The link is in the description below. Subscribe to be always aware of my newest podcast releases. For deeper breakdowns without the algorithmic noise, join the Inner Circle on Patreon. Scan the QR or use the link below as well. There are no uncontrolled processes. If you think there are, it's because you are unaware of the controls. Those who understand what's happening govern those who don't. Knowledge isn't just power, it's sovereignty. And right now, my friends, most people are sleepwalking. Think clearly, stay calm, rise above the noise. This is Eagle's View, where power meets perspective. See you next week.